But speaking about next gen, so further next gen news. So the DualSense has been leaked from a perspective around the controller. So they've actually got this got leaked on Twitter. It appears that someone who works on controller accessories, so accessories for the console, they like this has always been known that they do get the physical consoles and the controllers, and they can't really use them, but they use the actual physical devices to test the accessories and the molds and the prototypes to make sure that they fit and everything's like working well. And it seems like this person, and like I think, for you and I, we're always on the same page as this. This is wrong to do this. If you're in a position like this and you have access to this stuff, you should not share it. You are breaching, number one, your employer, but it's also doing the wrong thing from my perspective. But it is out there in the public. But yeah, the new piece of information here is that the actual capacity for the DualSense battery is now known, if this is correct. And yeah, go on.
So Indigo, can I ask, what is the DualSense? Because I don't think we've clarified that the DualSense is the new PlayStation 5 controller.
Yes. Well,
where's he going to mention the word PlayStation 5? I'm sure that most people listening are going to know what they'll... And they're probably, if they're watching on YouTube, they're going to see a picture of it. They know exactly what it looks like. But I don't... Yeah. When you say that, I know, but when I think of DualSense, I'm like, oh, that's right. That's what the PlayStation 5 controller is called. The fact that Sony always named their controllers is really funny to me, because I'm just it's the PlayStation controller, it's the Xbox One controller.
That's so funny.
To me, it's just the controller of the console, to name it. The only thing that made sense to me was the Wii Mote, because they also had the different they had the nunchuck and stuff, so they kind of had to name things there so people knew what they were talking about. Anyway, I just wanted to give you crap.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point to clarify, and there's a couple of things there. Number one, the whole Wiimote thing, it made me laugh because Nintendo always instructed everyone that they worked with, never ever ever call it Wiimote. It's Wii Remote, which just made me laugh because no one called it Wii Remote outside of when they had to. And whenever they'd refer to it, they'd always say Wiimote. And yeah, it's just funny.
Sorry, on that note, can I just mention, right, this is completely off topic, but I think it's a good chance to. I'm fairly certain the first time I ever heard about the Wii name was actually in the living room at one of your old house or something. And I'm like, I think we were talking, I think that's when I found out about it. I just happened to be hanging around with you at the time, because that when I think about when I heard about it, I just remember sitting there at the dining room table just being like, what are they smoking? We? What the hell? And to their credit, as much as I'm not a fan of that era of Nintendo, the name was not the problem. The name was fine. So I just thought that was just really interesting.
So I'm always obsessed about names, and that name is one of the names I always go to where it's the name doesn't matter. The name really doesn't matter. As long as it's not impossible to say. And I always try to remember this, but what is it? Supersonic, acrobatic, hyperpowered rocket cars or whatever.
Battle cars.
Yeah. And it's that's
that game no one remembers.
Exactly. And then the spiritual sequel to that, Rocket League. Okay, that's a good name. But you don't need to have a good name. You just need to not have the supersonic blah, blah, blah name.
And that's the thing is because when you said name doesn't matter, I think what you said there nails it. It only matters if you've got a bad name, the Wii U.
Or a cheese brand in Australia that is going to change its name finally, which I'm not even going to mention. That's how bad the name is, right? So yeah, if you've got a bad name, Washington Redskins, NFL team, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. Change your name. Just move on. Change your name. Call yourself Washington Football Club. That's fine. Move on. And it does, just kind of going back to the DualSense, which is PlayStation 5's next-gen controller. PlayStation 5's next-gen controller. It is funny because we're not console war people. I don't think we care. We'd probably get every console if we had the money. It is funny how from a PlayStation perspective, everyone always says DualShock 2, DualShock 3, DualShock 4. That's part of PlayStation. So to not go DualShock 5, which people were already saying, it is funny now to just go DualSense.
What? What was the PlayStation 3 one? Something...
Six
It
axis.
was called Six Axis, that's
See
right.
how
God,
it's like a
no one
PlayStation
remembers
thing.
that.
That was horrible,
Like,
man. That was so bad.
it was... What was the... It was Lair, wasn't it? That was Factor 5's... The game that put Factor 5 in the grave, which is... Oh, they were such a good developer. Man, I miss them.
Well, there was a story behind that because they were actually in a lawsuit, I believe, Sony, over, I think it was a vibration or something like that. And there was a whole bunch of stuff that they needed to take out of that 6-axis controller. It's horrible. It feels horrible. It's really light. Yeah, I've got one actually. I really don't like it.
And
I don't know if I have a DualShock 3, to be honest.
What was the PlayStation that originally had the boomerang controller? Was that PS2?
PS3.
Was it PS3?
So that was a
PS3.
prototype PS3 one, yeah.
So wait, so PS3 also had the boomerang and the 6-axis?
So it was meant to have the boomerang, and then everyone was like, "Wow, that looks horrible," and it does.
Yeah, I know. And then they got the 6-axis instead. So it was PS3 that had both of those. Wow.
Yeah, but the 6-axis, in fairness to them, like I think from memory, and I might be wrong, but from memory, they were in a lawsuit, and they were trying to basically get something around the Wii, right? So more like gyro stuff. So that's where that 6-axis crap came in, and it was horrible. And then later they released a DualShock 3, which everyone loves.
Oh yeah, my point is that that's just a real unfortunate, like, different. Basically, for one console to have that many, I guess, like, you know what I mean. It's to basically be like, oh, we can't figure out exactly all that. We've got things influencing, rather than, oh, well, this is a new controller and that's what it is. And I say that, a lot of the stuff Nintendo's shown off, like the original DS, Nintendo DS, like, it looks so different to what it ended up being. So it's, they're not the only, obviously, company that has showcased something and then decided, no, actually, that doesn't work.
And like, it is something funny about Sony though, because they do revise the core controller more often than you think. So with the first PlayStation, PS1, which we'll talk about later in the show, not too far away, they went from, no analog and, so it was almost like a Super Nintendo controller, to be honest, to then adding in analog and then like rumble as well. Like that's when the DualShock 1 came out. And that was like the core controller. Like, whereas most other console manufacturers, I'm just trying to think actually, like you never see Nintendo iterate the controller live in the lifespan, really. Like you kind of have the offshoots, like, the dog bone NES controller. Do you remember that? So stuff like that.
Yeah, you'll see slight revisions. Like, for instance, the Xbox One controllers at launch are actually slightly different than what they are.
Oh, really?
These days. Yeah. So
what's different? I didn't know that.
Just the bumpers work quite differently. Like the original bumpers on Xbox One controller were really bad. And
really?
You got to the point where you'd have to, like, after a while, you'd have to click at the top at like the apex of the button to get it to actually work. And what was really frustrating was the first game I bought for Xbox One, which is why I bought the console, was Dark Souls 2, Scholar of First Sin. And anyone who's played Dark Souls knows that you're pressing the right bumper a lot because that's your primary normal attack button. Every attack you do is the right bumper. And after a while, it just got so excruciating that that was a horrible thing. They fixed that, and I think they've gone through a couple of D-pad changes here and there, but but they didn't change, like, if someone, a general consumer, is looking at one and looking at the other, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference, or like they'd have to know about some of these changes. Unlike the DualShock, the PlayStation to DualShock was wow, and then they launched one. There was Ape Escape was a huge thing that used the dual analogs and things.
Yeah, correct.
So
no, I didn't realize that they've had so many revisions, and it's also like, added back in the 3.5mm jack, and they didn't have Bluetooth in the earlier ones.
Exactly.
On Xbox.
That's the other one. Yeah, Bluetooth was the one I was trying to think of, because they obviously, now you don't need any kind of adapter or anything to just use it on PC. You just, as long as you've got Bluetooth, I should say. So.
Yeah, no, that kind of blew me away, actually. I didn't know all this stuff about the Xbox control. It, like, and I'm not an Xbox user, but I'd look at the Xbox One controller, especially, the Elite 2. And I'd probably look at it and go, it's probably the best controller that's ever been made. It just looks like, everything about it looks very refined. So I'm actually interested in using it eventually when I pick up an Xbox at some stage,
Yeah,
maybe.
I'm keen to see what the new one, the Series X ones are like, because I think they've found a good formula for it, and it's kind of almost like, I'd say, the DualShock to DualShock 2 to DualShock 3. There's obviously differences, but the core model is very similar. Obviously, DualSense so different. DualSense is
Yeah,
very different. So
and just
you got to give it to Sony for actually doing something a bit different for once. As much as some people don't like it.
yeah, which is different to what they normally do, and probably just rounding out the update around the DualSense. So the reason why the whole battery capacity is so important is, for me, the biggest problem with the DualShock 4 is the lifespan of it, and the capacity of it's horrible compared to something like my Switch Pro controller, which, I kind of forget that I need to charge it, and then I'm like, oh, okay, it's running low, I'll go charge it. The DualShock is a third of the time, so I think it's like 10 to 14 hours. So you pretty much need to put it on the charge all the time if you're playing regularly. So, a 50% bump up compared to what the DualShock 4 is from a battery. And then also, as innovations go and connectivity and chips get better and more efficient, more energy efficient, I'm guessing that it's probably going to be, more of a 20 hour or 15, 20 hour, maybe even higher battery lifespan on the controller, the DualSense. So I think that that's pretty reasonable. And that will probably work for most people, and that's a nice bump up.